AI isn't just about big models or flashy demos. The real magic is happening where you have data, you have evaluations, you have deployment, and now all of them are coming together with autonomous planning, reasoning, memory in what we call agents.
What are some of the methodologies you think about when you're trying to ensure that sort of robustness?
Do a lot of adversarial scenarios simulation, see how agents respond under stress. Then there is also this aspect of memory hygiene. Do you have role-based access controls? What is stored? Where is it stored? When you do retrieval, do you verify who is trying to retrieve? Who should have write access? If I had to pick one skill that will be the most underrated in the coming AI-driven world, I'd say it would be.
Don't forget to subscribe to Data Neighbor wherever you listen to podcasts and YouTube. And drop a like and comment below. It keeps us bringing you great content like this. With that, let's dive into our conversation with Jigyasa Grover.
Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to have Jigyasa Grover in Data Neighbor podcast with Hi, Stravia, and Sean. She is a part of Google Advisory Board. She's a LinkedIn course instructor. She's an author of a book. She, I think, has a day job. It's very small thing to do, right? While you do all of these things, she's an ML engineer at Uber, worked at Twitter, and she has a big list of things in her arena. Jigyasa, thank you so much for joining us today and welcome to our pod.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, really an honor to be here with you all. And thank you so much for such a wonderful introduction. I'm flattered.
Oh my God. I think I cut out a few too, actually.
Too kind.
This is just awesome, Jigyasa. I'd love to understand what's your major interest? I know you are an ML engineer by profession and you are also doing so much work outside your day job where you are involved in all these ML specific forums, especially the Google Advisory Board and your courses. Would love to know a bit about you and then we can jump right into the current AI topics.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like most of it has been driven by the fact that I cannot sit still. There's always one or the other thing that I need to keep myself engaged with. And overall, the driving factor would be not to let your identity be defined by the day job that you do or maybe the company that you work with. So I feel like most of it ends up being like a snowball effect. I networked with you at a conference and, here I am. So I definitely owe a lot of it to the power of community, and one opportunity led to the other. So I've definitely written a couple of book chapters on detecting fake news on social media using deep learning or privacy preserving machine learning, and most of it has been on what's up and coming, how do I see tech or AI evolve in the next few years, and where is something that I could contribute.
That's awesome. So that probably leads into the current topic right now about agents. Jigyasa, what do you think is, let's say, 101 for people who are understand AI, want to understand what's the news in today's world of AI? Agents, evals, there's so many things, right? What are you focused on and what do you think is pretty interesting right now?
Yeah, I feel like the AI world we are at such a stage where we're building with tools and the tools themselves keep evolving day by day. So every day you wake up, there's a new model, new framework. So it's hard to keep up. But the core is we are moving more towards autonomous software. AI isn't just about big models or flashy demos. The real magic is happening where you have data, you have evaluations, you have deployment, and now all of them are coming together with autonomous planning, reasoning, memory together in what we call agents. So yeah, if I were to describe, my one would be, don't get distracted by the shiny models that you have. It's okay to have maybe not the latest version of the model. Think about the end-to-end life cycle. Data is where everything begins. You have garbage in, garbage out. It's cliche. It's been going out for so many decades at the point, but I feel like that is very real. When you are able to curate high quality, representative, and well-governed data set, that is what I would say separates a working model from a production ready system. And same goes for eval. Models are only as good as you measure them on, how you're measuring them, what you're measuring them on. In classical machine learning, we all knew about metrics like PRAUC, AUC, but with LLMs and the whole agentic systems, it gets hard, and it gets hard by 100x because not only you have the quantitative measures, but you also have to look at qualitative. You cannot possibly simulate tens of millions of scenarios that could happen. Like each human is unique, and the way they would interact with an LLM or an
Right.
agentic system would be so different.
Yeah, it is interesting where it's like we've talked about this on the podcast a few times where like the evaluation is so user specific. Like there's always been personalization in ML, but now it's also just like you're not only evaluating on person to person, but it could be totally like, I don't know, that person's mood that day or how fast they have to get something done that day. Their kind of tolerance to perfection or, and imperfection can vary so widely.
Basically context, right? Not just the person, but also the context of what they're working on, and ensuring that you basically are successful at giving an output that maps to the context. Probably you do care about wording or like, the precision of the answer in one setting for the same person, and they probably wouldn't care about the precision in another setting, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's all about, like for let's say 10 different users we have like tons of tools that we are providing to the agents. Now the tool trajectory would be so much different for like, these 10 different users. So I feel like, again, it's very hard. And even from like domain to domain, like I worked previously at a startup where we were building domain agnostic explainable AI systems, but that didn't really pan out well. So we had to like pivot to a lot of like small, medium businesses. Now I'm working more at a ride sharing company. So the context changes completely. It's not just about the models, but as you rightly put, it's about context engineering, having long-term memory, short-term memory, and have all those planning modules access them in a relevant manner, which is again hard to ensure reliability and evaluation at the same point.
Getting into agents a little bit, are there different types of agents?
I think again it is a very types of question, depends on the realm in which you're talking about. If you're talking more about when you're using a framework, then the agent types end up being, are you using a workflow agent or an LLM based agent? If you're looking at the domain in which they are being applied, you have task specific agents, or you have more tool using agents. And nowadays we're all moving towards multi-agent systems. So it's not just about having one singular agent, like a full hierarchical multi-agentic system where you have different rigid rule-based workflows, certain LLM-based routing. It's basically a collection of smaller agents who are all specialized and have their own specific tools, APIs, databases that they could interact with.
You mentioned like LLM versus workflow agents. Wonder if you might explain like what the difference between those two are.
Absolutely. So I think Google came up with their recent agent development kit, and that is a framework that allows developers to build agents from the ground up. In the different types of agents they define there, LLM-based agents are the ones that will work with an LLM to resolve any user query that you might have. So maybe create me a packing list for Rome for 3 days. Now, there are specific workflow type agents, which are again categorized as sequential or parallel or loop based agents, where you can have smaller agents and define a specific workflow. So you want 2 agents to run in sequence or 2 different agents to run in parallel based on certain, again, rules or a certain criteria that you would define.
Yasa, would it be great to get some examples, right? So maybe let me try. So for
Yeah.
workflow agents, let me just think if I want to like respond to a text that I probably get from maybe my mom or dad, let's just say like, okay, I'm in a meeting, I'll get back to you. Or we kind of, today I have to click on something, right? But imagine if my calendar is busy and I want every call or a message that I get to respond to that. It's like a workflow, right? There's no thinking per se. It's more like, would that be a workflow?
Yeah, so going back to my packing example, the one that I was giving. So think about I'm building like a travel assistant where I have one agent that looks for real time weather, one agent that defines like a packing list based on the weather. So I would define like a workflow. Like once you have the weather information, you need to go and update my packing list accordingly. And there would be another agent that in the parallel would be looking at, let's say, some live events happening at my destination and then create an itinerary based on that. And you could use that itinerary to update the packing list that you have. For example, you have like a Met Gala to go to, for example. So it'll ensure that you have like a gown added to your packing list. So all these kind of like workflows which agent should precede which agent
Hmm.
can be defined in that workflow setting.
That's awesome.
What's kind of like the, I guess, like challenges you ran in with that in terms of, I don't know, I just expect
Mhm.
like some of this stuff could like go off the rails or something, or like how do you kind of like help throw some guardrails around it, and what are kind of things you've encountered where it's
Mhm.
like, oh, we need to really account for these things as we build this out?
Absolutely. I feel like that is where also workflow agents kind of help
Hmm.
because they are more reliable and less adaptive as compared to LLM agents. So if you think LLM agents are more of thinkers, workflow agents would be the one that would define like the two agents should run in a sequence where, this should be, for example, the weather should be checked before creating a packing list. So to avoid, going off the rails, workflow is something that definitely comes in handy. Of course, you do have to have other set of like guardrails if you're looking at more PII or any sort of like harmful information to propagate.
So it basically has rules within itself, right? It's a workflow.
Yes.
It's one come after the other. So it's probably the less chances for it to go like, out
Mhm.
of the box thinking or something. Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I feel like sometimes if you have too many guardrails, you can, stifle up the creativity or
Mm.
create too many rigid workflows. But if you have too fewer guardrails, then maybe it leads to unsafe recommendations because of the asynchronous nature, maybe it ended up creating the packing list first and forgot to check the weather. But workflow would ensure that we are, it's kind of like guardrails to that.
Yeah. It's the process itself has some
Mhm.
guardrails because it's a workflow versus not.
Yeah, but I would still feel like the trick here ends up being how do you calibrate those constraints dynamically? Like you do require monitoring and feedback. Like what if the weather is not available? So how do you, go in that regard? Like are you looking at maybe past years weather? Or are you just giving like generic packing list? Are you giving like a note along with that? So you do, along with some hard coded rules, you do have feedback loops
Mm.
in it as well.
It's also combined, probably need to combine with, let's say, if we really want to make this agent, right? Let's say
Mhm.
the product that helps you come up with packing lists. Also has to be a personalization as part of it, right? Like a Jigyasa agent
Mhm.
that represents you on what you like and what you don't and incorporates that along with these
Mhm.
two things and probably acts as the guardrail, the biggest guardrail.
Mhm.
And no for these dresses, I hate them, and no for a black color, stuff like that. Like the guardrail that probably Sean was talking about, where
Mhm.
it's a combination of the workflow in itself that's more generic combined with personalization of who the person is and things like that.
Absolutely. And this kind of like leads us into like how are we managing
Hmm.
memory? And the memory ends up being like session memory. You have a long-term memory where that would store all of your user preferences, or let's say a picture of your midterm memory would be picture of your boarding passes or any of the upcoming tickets that you have. And then the short-term memory ends up being like something that's happening in the context. So how do you manage, all these different kinds of memory? I feel like is
So
one of the hardest part as we end up creating agents.
I think that's the biggest, hardest part from when it comes to AI. I mean, this is just my take. I don't deal with a
Mhm.
lot of LLMs on my day-to-day work where I create agents. Just from using them enough, it's majorly ensuring the evals are right? Like
Mhm.
ensuring that we are measuring it right, like to not let them go bonkers or do something entirely different. The other one is around ensuring that they have the context. Sometimes the answers are very good, but not apt for you. How can the answers be more relevant to you? It's
Mhm.
that it needs to remember all these things from
Mhm.
probably what I shared with it from a long time ago, from like yesterday or from like even today, things like that. So the
Mhm.
timelines of the context, how much it needs to be shared, needs to be saved, and how much like needs to be thrown out. That's probably a big task in itself, right?
Yeah, it's as a put it, it's not just about retaining, but also like retrieving the relevant part and
Yeah.
then reasoning along with it. So again, the three R's that we usually deal with. And the challenges with memory again come to the point like you can retrieve as much as you want, but LLMs have like a certain context window. So there are limits. You cannot just retrieve everything and put it into LLMs at once. So specifically if you are working with large scale systems, you want the latency to be low, and the latency can be low if you're not using too much of the context window of the language models. So how do you use those external memory stores? How are you retrieving just the absolute best context that you need? nothing more, nothing less. So figuring out that right amount of data, I feel, is again one of the challenging pieces that we have.
I love it. Let's summarize the 3 R's. You said, so regarding memory and context, it's 3 R's. Retain. The
Yes.
memory basically retain the context. The second one is retrieve, because it's
Mhm.
you could retain billions and millions of information about a person, but how do you retrieve the relevant one regarding the
Mhm.
specific task? And then reason if that's a right retrieval or not, or do you have something else that that you could retrieve from a different point in time and get it back? So
Yes.
retain, retrieve, and reason, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, because not everything from the history is useful. We need,
Mhm.
some sort of like logic to prioritize recent or maybe contextually relevant memories. And along with that, you would, also focus on, after accessing relevant memory efficiently, like how do you apply memory to make those decisions, how you are providing it to the LLM. So reasoning, I would say, is about using a lot of retrieved memories to inform the current actions of the language model.
Would we have agents who do that?
I think we are still building agents that would, are able to, retrieve and reason accordingly. But having autonomous software, I feel like would end up being, us in a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
Tools are evolving.
So darn cool. Because I keep thinking it's the same problems as humans we deal with, right? Like
Absolutely.
few people are good with names, few people are not, few people are good with numbers. It's all the context sits in your brain. We probably all of us have stored it in our memory at some point. Some gets thrown out, some gets remembered,
Mhm.
and it's cache. The more you heard about it, kept calling, the easier it's up in their memory.
Mhm.
And I wonder if there is any of this dynamics of human brain incorporated into how memory is being done.
Yeah, that is definitely very interesting to think about, because I often think about like certain pieces of my life, like being so like photographic in a way that I can just recall the exact scene as is. And certain parts of my life I cannot even remember. So maybe agents are, somewhat in that sense, like we do have given weightage to some long-term memory and some mid-term memory. But even I feel like if you're thinking about human brain, the short term memory that, as humans we have, it can be something of like, in context learning that we attribute LLMs to. Maybe something that we have the long term memory, it could be those vector databases and knowledge bases that we have. But that midterm memory, I'm still kind of like not able to put an exact finger to, like, how are we encoding those experiences, patterns, and associations. Human brain is definitely very complex.
Neuralink is the way to go, probably.
Yeah. Waiting for that day where I could have infinite memory.
Hey, Jigyasa, what's your kind of like experience in traditional ML and now working with AI and building agents? Are
Mhm.
there, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of folks who are kind of trying to shoehorn in AI to certain solutions where, hey, maybe
Mhm.
this might not make like the most sense, or maybe this like really does like totally outperform like historic or not historic, but traditional kind of ML methods. I'd love to get your perspective on kind of like where you've seen that line drawn in certain areas of work where it's like, yeah, this is like a really great area. We should be leveraging like agentic frameworks here,
Mhm.
where it's like, oh, we should just do like some traditional stuff here. It'll perform just as well or better.
So I think like one thing that definitely strikes me is when people say AI will take over the world and it'll replace everything, and AI is here. I feel like AI was always here. Even the traditional ML models that we used to work with, they do
Hmm.
come under that umbrella of AI. It's just the generative AI part is new, and not new in the sense, but it's becoming more commercially available. Previously, it was more restrictive to labs and, just encoder based systems, and now we have decoder based systems. So having that, traditional ML systems versus modern LLM or agent driven solutions, I feel like it's a very important distinction. Like traditional ML still shines. Like if I'm working for recommendation systems or personalization systems where I have well defined inputs and a ground truth and well defined output, I feel like traditional ML is not only easier, it's, comparatively translucent, if not transparent. You can still
Hmm.
tell what's happening. It's structured, it's well measured. You can evaluate it very to the T using the metrics that we have. Whereas in more of like open ended and reasoning heavy environments or something that's more interactive, agentic or LLM solutions would be winning. I feel like if you're trying to replace maybe a simple structured prediction problem with an LLM, in my opinion, you're adding complexity without any real value. You're trying to predict any type of like cancellations or people not interacting with your video recommendation system with, let's say, a giant language model is
Mhm.
overkill. Traditional ML is much more faster, it's much more cheaper, and maybe even much more sustainable.
Yeah.
There's so much of resources that go into when you're doing inference using an LLM. Whereas if I was working with any open-ended reasoning tasks, I feel like XGBoost or a deep learning model would not have been the best choice if I'm trying to interpret the intent of the user, because there's so much that goes before and after exactly where context and memory come into play. So I would still feel like traditional ML is here to stay. You can always find ways to augment traditional ML models using LLMs. So currently I'm working on a lot of like post hoc explanations. How do you explain your traditional ML models rankings to product managers or data scientists and maybe to the end customers? How do you explain them that their past behaviors, which particular ad they clicked, is making you recommend the next ad that you're seeing? So those kind of like interactive reasoning heavy tasks are definitely augmented using LLMs, but the recommendation tasks definitely traditional ML wins.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, especially what you were saying about interpretation or of
Mhm,
like intent is something where even in some like the evaluation work I'm doing, we use pretty traditional NLP stuff to
mhm,
like score things, just like in terms of like distance of edits away from each other.
mhm.
But LLMs are really helpful when we're trying to understand intent, where it's like, why is this score so different than the other thing? What was like the user? Did the user edit it this way? And you can have a subject matter expert come through and like read some of that stuff, but that doesn't scale obviously the way LM does.
Also, like human memory, right? You might not be able to remember. Maybe 10 years ago, you saw a similar user do a similar thing, but maybe
Yeah,
language models can.
that's such a good point.
That's so basically almost reasoning at scale, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, if you want something and you don't want reasoning for things that doesn't need reasoning, basically. That doesn't
Mhm,
need you to understand details and like get through the like if without that it's basically more of a business rules and or more of a regular ML problem to go after.
mhm,
So that's pretty interesting that these problems will always be there because probably agents will use them to solve, if not for people. But the way
yeah.
you solve those problems is traditional ML for
Mhm.
sure. It's in the because the problems are not going away.
Yeah, absolutely. And we already talked about, the explanation part. Now, we could also use it to do a lot of like feature engineering, like how do you leverage language models to extract maybe a
Hmm.
pattern that they see across a user's profile and use that as additional feature for the traditional models that we have. So there are different ways you can, leverage language models, but the typical pattern matching is again, as we saw, like traditional ML would win.
Yeah, even on like some have been working on this project a little bit, or we've been
Mhm,
doing some like causal analysis modeling stuff, and we're kind of exploring like, oh, is there a way we could use LMs for this? And it's just like you just mentioned, like the actual like modeling and methodology we're doing is just like very classic econometrics
mhm,
regression things, but there's so much more feature engineering we can do and like variables that we can create of things that just were previously when we would draw out some design our kind of like causal model, we're like, oh, these are just things that like we can't capture that information. And
mhm.
unfortunately, like that's like the limitation of this model. Whereas now you can leverage LLMs to like build these new variables.
Absolutely. And the other aspect where they end up being helpful is like to do a causal analysis or experiment analysis to figure out like what metrics relates to the other and why could that be.
Mm,
You give feature importance scores, the typical importance scores that you have, and try to make it reason. So it can be a reasoning buddy, like an
yeah.
analyst at your hand.
Totally, totally. Yeah, before so much of that, I mean, still today is like you are just meeting with tons of different like stakeholders and users and customers and trying to like interview people and understand what's from their perspective,
Mhm.
what's going to go into this and how they relate to each other. And now, yeah, you can just have your kind of sidekick do a lot of that stuff for you. And maybe you still go as the people to kind of like
Yeah.
review that and check it off, but
Yeah.
get a lot further faster.
Yeah, the typical human in the loop evaluation, right? We still need that. Agents are not at that level of autonomous behavior that we can leave everything up to them.
So I love this, Jigyasa. We ended up talking a lot about like LLM and agents for productivity, right? That's what we are talking
Mhm.
about. Like, our day to day, how could we use them to just make our work better. Probably we could do 1.5x more work if you have these buddies to help you like move fast on these things. How have you what's your thoughts about like agents for actual B2C needs? Let's say maybe 5 years from now we have an app that we open. What are some things that we see like agents could help performers rather than who we interact with on a regular like on a basis today versus 5 years from now?
If I'm understanding, your question correctly, I feel like it's about like where agents can be helpful in like a B2C
Yes.
environment.
Yes.
I feel like a lot of different places, like we've already seen like the basic ones, like, doing a lot
Of
of like
course.
automation in preferences, habits, helping us book things, schedule stuff. But eventually, ultimate, I feel like the battle that we have to fight is evaluation. Like, how do we know our agents are ready to face the real world? Because they won't operate in isolation. They will collaborate with tons of other agents because now we have, A to A where, agents can interact with different types of agents. They'll be making mistakes. They'll be resolving complex problems. So how do you, ensure that if you're ready to launch your agents, they would not need any sort of like human oversight. They would be autonomous. They would be able to like, preserve your privacy, ensure the memory is working absolutely correctly, and they'll be able to like maintain those long-term context. So I think like that is something that I'm most wary about, is how do we know we are ready to launch them?
Okay. So your answer basically for an agent that could replace today is kind of the examples that we're seeing today, right? So really probably instead of a travel agent, we'll have a travel LLM agent, the actual person versus a travel
Mhm.
LLM agent that helps you book things and pack your listing. But to get into a fully autonomous LLM agent world, we need to figure out how the implementation happens behind it and what challenges we face. And the challenges are that you're talking about this travel LLM agent might have to interact with other agents from probably another service that they're using,
Yeah.
need to be able to filter out a really bad recommendation from another agent versus the actual legit agent. How do you build evals inside it to ensure that this filtration happens, this understanding happens, and that we could have like a purely autonomous like
Yeah,
workflow?
I feel like because currently we are working with either like singular agents or some sort of like multi-agent systems which lie maybe in the same ecosystem. But what if you want to like go beyond, like you're talking with some agent at Expedia and it, like tries to ring up Hyatt's agents and maybe like Air Canada's agents and tries to like book the tickets and, look at the exact time and date. And it's not able to like, it's not hallucinating, because definitely there would be a case where you would need like multi-layered verification or any sort of like self reasoning or self correction mechanisms. So I feel like that is definitely one of the bottleneck is scalable evaluation and then memory and
Mhm.
limits.
And I'm like so worried about the new age hackers that could get into the system. Like, imagine you are interacting with an agent that's trying to book for another person, and what information can you extract from this agent,
Mhm.
right? About like booking or make it trust you that it gives you the information. So many things need to be figured out in that process.
Absolutely. I feel like there's this new term of LLM jacking where you hijack an
Yes.
LLM, or you do like prompt injection where you deliberately ask an agent to reveal credit card number of like the last person you talked to and then use that to do bookings. So yes, there are tons of things that could go wrong. Like you could exploit the hallucinations or maybe any of the reasoning flaws the model has. I've seen, some of the bad actors try to poison the memory or like poison the training data and try to like repeat the same thing 100 times and ask the agent to like remember it and remember it for like everyone who comes next after them. So there are tons of ways you could exploit multi-agent systems, but how do you make those agents robust to bad actors or malicious use?
What are some of the like methodologies you think about when you're trying to
Mhm.
ensure that sort of robustness?
I feel like the one thing is to do a lot of adversarial scenarios simulation
Mm.
to see how agents would respond under stress, the typical stress testing. And this is not just a one time thing. You'll have to like continuously monitor and track the anomalous behavior in agent outputs and continuously try to like update their, base prompts, for example.
Yeah.
And then there's also this aspect of like memory hygiene. Like, do you have role based access controls? What is stored? Where is it stored? When you do retrieval, do you verify who is trying to retrieve? And do you have write access? Who should have write access? Like, whose preferences should you update? And there should not be any sort of like cross contamination. And that is why till date, I feel like a lot of high stakes decisions are happening with human in the loop until you
Right.
do get to the full trust and alignment.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I feel like so much of the I feel like the fears I hear from people are kind of what Shravya mentioned around like hacking and sort of like my information bleeding over to someone else's or vice versa. Yeah, a lot of the evaluation I've seen is more around how's the quality of the answer and are we getting it correct? Yeah, I don't know. That's just something I think like in
Mm.
my job or other people's job where a lot of people maybe I don't know if you've seen it differently, but haven't invested as much in sort of that security side of the evaluation part.
We are running so fast about wanting to get better at reasoning, wanting to get this thing. I think the 0.1%, maybe 0.001%, actually, to be honest. Because if in this millions of actors that are going to interact with these agents, malicious ones are not going to be many. But whoever is going to be malicious, they're going to be like worth taking, like, with all the point, even though they're a really small representation of the final users, it's very important to ensure that while
Yeah.
we're this fast to, some sort of a curtail.
Yeah, I try to kind of like draw a parallel with, how we used to work with traditional ML systems. The first thing was always training the model so that it gives you the utmost accurate or the most precise answer.
Mhm.
Once it was kind of like established, you work towards making it more scalable, reducing the latency of it, and then working towards, how people could like, again, bad actors could misuse those models. We also had, I would say decent enough surface areas for traditional ML, but generative AI takes it to the next level by X just because its powers are 100x. So yes, doing evaluation would also consider identifying any sort of like potential attack surfaces we could have. Memory corruption is one. You have the multi system orchestration vulnerabilities where you have your agent interacting with hundreds of APIs, for example. What if you
Mm.
lose one of the API key, for example? That has happened. How do you manipulate how the output is being, surfaced to the end user? There are lots of like social engineering people at the play here as well. And then bad actors could even use adversarial prompts or any sort of like malicious instruction. So how do you bake this into evaluation, where I would feel like this would come under the umbrella of like adversarial testing? You would have people who are specialized in adversarial testing create these scenarios and try to like prompt inject the agent or try to like mislead it, and then evaluate the robustness. Like, does the agent still respect any of the guardrails or safety constraints? So I think like these are some of the things that we need to account for before our agents are ready to go run wild in the world.
We actually had a pod about that. Do you remember,
Oh,
Sean?
nice.
This was like a
Mhm.
couple of months ago. And we did go slightly deep into like all the things that could go wrong and how
Mhm.
they're working on making it better. Yeah, we can
Yeah.
link. That's pretty cool. I think people are talking about, like, if you see OpenAI research, this was from a few months ago, probably May or April, they talk about how different age groups are using OpenAI or ChatGPT. Probably older folk are using it for, just making their text better or just generating something. And then the younger folks are using it, like college going, they're using it like a life advisor or like a coach or something. They just talk to it daily. And there's a set of folk who are using it for their workflows to just make their
Mhm.
work better, have calendar synced, and like just make X. They're already trying to use it for productivity. So I just wonder about this, like the more this younger generation will start using ChatGPT as like treated like actually another human or another entity that you could interact with and
Yeah.
trust. The implications of the adversarial effect just get more
Mhm.
important.
Yeah, it's very scary to think about like if you are treating a language model as, maybe just another friend. Like back in those days, you used to have pen friends, right? You used to like write letter. So
Mhm.
maybe I think we're coming back to that full circle, but instead of like pen friends, you have pen agents.
Yeah.
or keyboard agents.
Like, I'll tell you an example. Like, my 5-year-old and like other kids that I know, they ask the question to the mom or dad, and once they answer, I'm like, no, let me ask Siri. She knows better.
Oh God.
Go to Siri. Hey Siri, is this true? Do sharks really, do they like have this ocean? Do they do it this way? I'm like, I told you. I'm like, they know. They trust Siri more. They trust Alexa more. Like, we have these little. I don't know if you're aware. They're the kid friendly Alexas that people that's like little owl. So they made the newer AI more like easy. Like, kids are growing up with it right now. Like I said, the Alexa, they ask them for jokes, they ask them for facts and like whatnot. Homework questions are asked today, probably to Alexa.
Do my homework for me, please.
I mean, that's probably all college students are doing.
Yeah, but there are pros as well. Like for the longest time, I've always wanted like maybe, replicate myself, like have like a twin of myself who could do maybe work on personal emails while I do my work stuff. But, now thanks to a lot of these AI tools, I'm able to, I'd say do some of the things like much more faster. Like for younger generation, again, I feel like LLMs could be, this amplifiers of curiosity. As you mentioned, like kids are more curious and now their curiosity, if they have questions, they get immediate answers. But there was also a time where, you had to like go to the library, pick up that encyclopedia and, try to, there was another fun and thrill in that kind of like whole journey of getting to the results. But I do feel like, there could be some risks of, over reliance or maybe misinformation being propagated, specifically if you think about maybe some sort of like critical thinking or, education, as we say.
No, definitely. Basically, I absolutely agree with you on how powerful of a tool this is, but it needs to come with its own big manual, probably. And it's the people like you and us who build those manuals, right, to ensure that we have these right set of evaluations done, right set of guardrails met for us to actually make it successful. Basically, at its task, and second, to make it successful while ensuring that the guardrails are met.
Yeah, I'd be curious too, like if they are starting up like a new curriculum where how to talk to an agent would be kind of like taught in maybe elementary schools.
Yeah. I mean, imagine if that happened when like social media got introduced, where if there was like,
Yeah.
hey, at this age, like if we knew what we knew now, like if there's some stuff around teachers, like or with parents or whatever, like, hey, here's like a healthy way to introduce your children to social media or don't introduce them to it. But AI is quite different, I think, because like I guess you could use it in some sort of like social aspects like that. Like there's people with AI like in AI relationships now, but there's just also like with AI, there's like so many like productivity benefits and like educational benefits as well. So it's not really a parallel, but I don't know. I wish there's. I guess I was like right at the area where like I didn't really get social media until like the very end of high school or something. But I mean, I can't imagine it with like kids who grew
Not
up with
just
that the whole
social
time.
media.
Yeah.
Totally agree. Not just social media, Sean, even with YouTube. I don't know if you've come across these. Like if there's a YouTube on some philosophy or some people, going through failure and this is like, chance of success or whatever. And then first few comments that have the highest likes are like, oh my God, I was thinking about it today. I will, and then this suddenly pops up. It's God way of telling me that he's there for me and he shows me this video at the right time. I'm like, he showed you that because of YouTube algorithm. You were searching for things around
Yeah.
it. Like, there are so many people, like even my cousins who are probably not in tech, and they talk about why am I, because they are afraid of some symptom that they're facing. They search on internet. They see cancer as one of the reasons and they search about it and they keep getting Google ads about cancer and curing cancer. And there was one of my, my cousins who went into almost a depression thinking that why am I seeing these signs everywhere? It means I have this. I'm like, the signs are coming from your own search.
Yeah.
Like you said, probably we need education, right?
Absolutely.
As
Yeah.
like elementary, like really foundational education on how these things work, what do they mean, how don't take things as these signals or whatever when they're not. They're purely your And this gets X and 100x more important with LLMs, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, like they're nothing just probabilistic parrots, LLMs. They just know how to see some pattern and like start speaking on like similar lines to you. So yeah, education is, I feel like, something that would stay. Again, I kind of like draw parallel to how calculators came and people had that fear that, we would lose basic arithmetic skills.
Mm,
LLM and AI agents are kind of like similar, but there could be, that risk of losing oneself. So you need to be very thoughtful about the training and the safeguards that we.
absolutely.
It's funny how we went into this route of discussion from implementing evals and guardrails to actually like thinking through the future of what happens when things
But I
come.
think that the discussion is like very real. Like we might not have all the answers at the
Yeah.
point, but the pace at which the world is changing, it's hard to even get answers, but things are very, very real. And it could basically change how, humanity is and how we kind of like operate.
So, Jigyasa, in all these different models that have come out, how do you see them? Like probably like your understanding of how you use them for your work per se, and your personal, if you use it for your personal use cases. Because what are the top ones and what you've seen them be good at? I know we kind of have things like Claude's getting really good at code these days, and some few others in a different way. So, would love your take on it.
Yeah, I feel like we do, whenever a new model comes up, they always like publish these benchmarks to
Hmm.
showcase, how their model is the best. But many of the times it does boil down to what kind of like task you're trying to achieve. For me personally, I felt that if I'm trying to do any of, let's say, the reasoning tasks or something about like my own productivity, or maybe like responding to emails or doing some sort of like multi-step workflows or summarizations, like GPT-5 or like the whole GPT family, I feel like does come out like very strong because of the natural language understanding and the generation capabilities that it has, and more so also like I've set it up for me in such a way that it has access to most of the information that it would need for me and from me, and it would help me do the tasks as desired. If I'm talking more about the coding workflows that I have, where I would try to develop something, do some analysis, work with, tools like Cursor, for example, I love Claude Sonnet. I feel like it's very good. It is able to like have that long context memory. Maybe it's clubbed with the fact that, it does work with Cursor. So Cursor as a product itself is also very good at grasping patterns throughout the repository, for example, and try to suggest like, this is how maybe other teams are doing that. Maybe you should try something similar. So it helps me do a lot of like code optimizations.
Hmm.
And since I'm like new in the company that I'm working in, onboarding has been such a breeze. Like I onboarded like maybe the last time I onboarded versus this time I onboarded in like a very, very big company, things have been different. Like most of the questions I would not even maybe ask in public channels because
Yeah.
I have all the answers using like Glean or Cursor. So most of the times, like onboarding does become like a breeze, and even like collaboration. So, and if I'm looking for like more, let's say, research, if I want to like read and different blog posts at the same time, I would gravitate towards Perplexity. Like its real
Mm.
time knowledge integration, I feel is maybe one of the best of the lot. So, yeah, those are like some of the tools that I use and how I feel like the different models. Over the weekend, I was experimenting a lot with Nano Banana, and I think they have nailed it, to be really honest. Like I'm able to like imagine myself in like hundreds of different scenarios and with
Yeah.
just words, and even the latency isn't a lot, but I feel like we are at that cusp where maybe like certain professions like designers or like photographers, like we'll have to like rethink and think of like maybe alternative ways to keep yourself engaged or create business out of that.
Hey, have you tried that Perplexity Comet browser yet?
Not yet, I haven't
I
had a chance.
I haven't either. Okay, okay. Yeah, I want to try that out maybe this week or
Oh
something. But
yeah,
that looks pretty cool. I've heard pretty good things about that.
yeah, I've heard that too, but yeah, I haven't had access yet.
It would probably basically be like every tabs. I mean, it's powered by Perplexity, right? If you want to
Mhm.
ask something, it just gives you.
Yeah, I've heard it's
I-
like Cursor for web browsing. Like
Mhm.
there's like chat on the side, and I heard it actually does like pretty good in terms of like just like watching like mouse clicks at like it's can't think of the word, but I don't know. It's like I guess what I would think would be like hand-eye coordination or something is even
Mhm.
like quite
That's
impressive.
pretty cool.
Will
I
it
haven't
see
used
that
it. I
after
just
seeing, will it be able to gauge that after seeing a product like my eyes are twinkling and I really want it added to the cart?
yeah.
Probably if the camera's on, maybe it
Yeah,
wants the camera to be on.
ultimate form of autonomous behavior.
Wow, I love where we're going with this whole thing.
I did try something of like a similar product by another company, which I don't know if I should be naming or not, but they're trying to like build something similar, where basically, there would be an agent that lives in your browser and, you could chat with it, ask different questions. It'll like pull out, like you're looking for like a blue handbag. It'll like search for all the royal blue handbags and try to do like pros and cons, look at your past purchasing history, recommend like if it's good value for money or not.
And that's actually, yeah, that's such a good use case in terms of I feel like even the smallest things I buy now, there's so many different things and so many reviews are just complete bullshit
Yeah.
that I like do not like I was buying a kayak paddle today and I was just like been putting this off for like 3 weeks. I'm like, oh, I don't even want to get into the Reddit of like what's a
Oh,
good kayak paddle. And then finally I spent probably like 2 hours figuring one out, but that would have been a good thing to just use like Perplexity's browser to like go
yeah.
around, find all the sites on it, find like the best one from whatever
Mhm.
Reddit says, compare the deals.
Yeah. I think like
This
these are the type of like productivity gains
Yeah.
I absolutely love having AI for.
so this just comes with so much trust in the type of data that it's mining, right?
Yeah.
I wonder everyone moving away from so there should be a real world to work the agents to work on, right? If everyone's creating this is again this loop, right? If everyone's creating the real world based on agents that they learn from, so important to basically for people to continue chatting on Reddit for Perplexity to go get that information
Yeah.
back, right?
Yeah, I think like that is where there was this another debate that was happening. I would say on the internet a couple of like weeks ago was about the AI generated content. Like LLMs, like their whole training data is like massive books and blogs of the past. But as we are sliding with like that rolling window, the window when we come to like maybe after 2022, everything would be like AI generated. How are you ensuring there's trust? Like what about the citations? AI generated content is increasing. People are like publishing like books and blog posts all just like mindlessly copying off of ChatGPT. But
Yeah.
what if like the language model starts training on those? So we do need some sort of like signal that says this is human generated and this is AI generated. So how do I would say the biggest challenge comes here is like the dilution of the human signal as AI
Mm.
generated content increases.
And imagine Jigyasa will probably need human generated, AI generated, and agent generated as well, without any human involved. Like just agents being active and just creating. You could have something like that, social agents.
Yeah.
I was reading about having a social, what is it, a virtual social media or like an agent social media somewhere. And I'm like, this is as crazy as it can get, like agents being with another agentic world.
Yeah, it's kind of like interesting. I've seen how a lot of like design world is using like content provenance. So it's kind of like a digital nutrition label you might have for like a media. So you can add like how many layers of like changes was it done on, like how much content is like AI generated, how much of it is like human generated. So a lot of these social media companies, or even like Adobe, for example, or Nikon, they're kind of like deliberately asking users who are uploading any of these details, like even TikTok is doing that, to have that made with AI label.
That's pretty cool. I didn't know about TikTok doing that actually.
Yeah,
That's
I think
pretty
even like Meta has started. YouTube, for example, has always said like you cannot monetize any of the AI generated content,
Hmm.
because there was a time like between video synthesis coming out till YouTube saying not to monetize AI generated content, because there was like tons of tutorials. Even Reddit was full of the fact that people were using Sora or like Gemini to generate videos and then put it on YouTube and monetizing them.
But isn't that the world that we want to go into? So these are the decisions probably that big companies have to make, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's not just touching the whole AI part, but it's also like changing the whole monetization industry and how do you monetize certain things. For example, we are moving more from CEOs to GEOs, where you have to like optimize your. I was recently having a talk with one of the brands, and they wanted help with boosting their product to be shown more in the LLM generated answers and things like Comet, for example, because they felt like their website wasn't getting as much boosted or as much recommended when people would ask questions on ChatGPT, for example. So people are moving more towards, optimizing their websites using GEOs.
That's pretty cool. That's going to be
Yeah.
another big set of topics because SEO is a big
Mhm.
game itself.
Yeah.
Can imagine this being another big one. Yeah. Awesome. We are getting to a close end, Jigyasa. I think before we close, one final question for you. I try to ask this to almost all our guests who come in, right? What do you think would be the skill that's most underrated in this new world of AI, according to you, that people should hold on to or just get better at?
If I had to pick one skill that will be the most underrated in the coming AI driven world, I'd say it would be the critical reasoning ability and that intuition and creativity to reason and contextualize and synthesize information along with AI and not just
Mm.
rely on AI fully. Because ultimately, you do need that human judgment and you need to really hone on those human judgment skills.
Wow, that's so cool. Because I was listening to this math professor from Carnegie Mellon, and he was talking about what does it mean now that we're going to have AI for elementary school kids, middle school kids, high school kids, or even college going kids, or like adults. He was talking about the same thing, that analytical reasoning is very much going to be needed, irrespective of you actually are going to do that math problem versus not, but you
Mhm.
able to think through those solutions and problems, and your brain, how your brain acts when you see a problem, that's still very important. In fact, even more important, because the boring ones are now getting solved, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, just how, when calculators came, like everyone, we were, forced to do a lot of like math problems and there were a lot of like competitions around that. Similarly, I feel like we'll have like, you'll be sitting in a room where you'll have like mental gyms, for example, and you have to use your brains.
I can imagine that already. Like physical gyms, having mental gyms, come here, improve your memory by so much. Oh, wow. That's a world we're living in. So
Yeah, absolutely.
looks like Jigyasa, you just predicted one of the roles that, or one of the businesses that's going to come up with AI, mental gyms,
Yeah.
for that, have in-person businesses for that.
Yeah. Oops, I just revealed my next business investment.
This was so
Yeah.
awesome, Jigyasa. Thank you so much for joining us. It was a great chat
Yeah.
just about everything around AI and all the work that you've done in this space. Very excited for everything that you're doing in this space. And for everyone who is watching, please subscribe to Data Neighbor Podcast. You have any questions or comments, please add them in the comments. We'll definitely answer them, and Jigyasa would also answer them if you have any for her. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah,
you so
thank you.
much, Shravan and Shane. It was really fun chatting with you today.
Yeah, this is great. And also to our listeners, you have a couple LinkedIn learning classes too, right? I don't know if you want to do a quick shout
Yes.
out on those.
Yeah, that'll be great. Thank you so much. So I have two LinkedIn courses. One is on integrating AI into product architecture. So if you're an ML engineer or a product manager or someone who's simply looking how you can elevate your product using AI and what are the challenges and how do you mitigate those, definitely take a look at that. And the second is if you're getting started on building agents and want to use Google's agent development kit to build agents from the ground up. I have a hands-on class. It's called Hands-on Building Agents with Agent Development Kit. Do give me, a connection request on LinkedIn, and I can provide you a free access to it. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Oh, that's
That's
awesome. I'm definitely going
awesome.
to check this out. I was just looking at the curriculum right now. It looks really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And you do get access to GitHub repository with it as well.
Oh,
So,
cool.
That's
Cool. Nice.
awesome. Okay. Thank you so much, Jigyasa. It was wonderful having you. Bye, everyone.
yeah, bye bye.
Thanks.